literally building makeshift desks in the dining room to try and get some space for everybody to work. I remember, I do remember that.
Yeah, it was taking home office to a whole new level.
Yeah, home office. Yeah, can you show me where my desk is? Yes, it's in that flat back over there. Here's a screwdriver and put it together. And we had everyone in the family at that point, I think, was involved in the business.
Yeah, it was funny sitting on meetings with the team, and then half of us were all in the same room anyway.
Exactly, yeah. So hello and welcome to season 1, episode 4 of the wonderful podcast. We're just kind of backtracking a little bit to set the scene for moving forward again from opening the platform for charities using open banking and how we got to that stage. Carmen's just reminded me of literally every member of the family being involved in the telecoms business in the early stages of lockdown as we tried to cope with the demand that we were seeing from the National Health Service users and pretty much everyone else who was suddenly deeply involved in telephone conferencing and all working from home in lockdown.
Yeah, I think as if it wasn't intense enough being locked down with your family for everyone in the country, we decided let's also spend the whole working day together as well.
Add a bit more tension to the day,
Yeah,
exactly. And of course, it was, it was pretty stressful because we were dealing with unprecedented demand for telephony service as well. So trying to cope with all of the customer support issues that was throwing up, and of course, people in brand new environments. So a lot of the people that were using the service completely unused to remote working.
yeah.
So yeah, challenging for sure. Yeah, I remember those desks going up and us trying to order headsets in a rush and get more people online and just figuring out how we dealt with it. And and then we were talking at the back end of episode 3 about how we made that first donation, or I made that first donation and had that first experience of open banking. And I think that shortly after lockdown was announced, that's when we at least took the decision that we were going to try and get the platform reopened. But again, just
Yeah.
worth going back because talking about everybody being involved, Dan got involved, and that was his first real exposure to doing any coding. Was initially for the telephone conferencing service. We were trying to launch some additional services around video conferencing and some additional O3 number services. I remember him coding for the first time and getting involved in that.
Yeah,
What a
I
journey for
think
him that's been as well into now running his own businesses and
classic
getting
Daniel just decides to do something and just gets on with it on his own, and
yeah those YouTube
suddenly,
videos. How do I
yeah,
code? Well, start with YouTube and then take it from there. Now he's done really, really well. I'm very, very proud of all of his achievements. It's been amazing. So he started then shortly after we took that decision, really working with Citizen to replace Stripe as we had on the platform. So we had Citizen replacing Stripe, and we were going to launch with a completely open banking only donation flow. And thinking about that, it was scary, but also not particularly scary in the sense that we were never charging for the service. It was always something that we were doing because we felt it was a great thing to be doing. But it wasn't that jobs were on the line if it didn't succeed or anything.
yeah.
It was a 100% philanthropic, and we wanted to put it out there and again see whether there was an appetite for
It
this
was
new
like a
solution.
proof of concept, I think,
Yeah,
basically. See if this is going to work, see if people are actually willing to just use open banking solely to make a donation.
yeah. And there were a few unknowns though, because I think when we went into that initially, we were probably unaware of the fact that we were going to have to completely re-onboard all of the charities that use the
Yeah.
service again from scratch.
Which is a lot, because I think when we closed down, we were up to what, nearly over 4,000?
More than 4,000 charities,
Yeah.
yeah.
So to say goodbye to all of those and 6 months later be like, oh, do you want to come back? Um,
Yeah.
you have to do the whole onboarding again and everything, and now it's just going to be open banking. I think it was daunting, but at the same time, it was exciting to see how it played out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely another process. I think it kind of felt a bit deja vu-ish because it was like when we'd first opened, trying to get charities on board. We've reopened again and we're trying to get them on board again, and it's not that easy necessarily to
No.
get those charities back. And also, you have to think that that was what the second half of like lockdown and 2020. A lot of charities were really struggling, so they might not have had the the time or people to be able to be signing up to new fundraising platforms. That probably wasn't their priority for a lot of charities.
And of course, the nature of fundraising had changed dramatically
Yeah,
very quickly because there's very little outdoor fundraising activity taking place. Nobody's running. I remember the London Marathon being rescheduled twice, if I remember rightly, in terms of the time of year that was running. But same with all of the big events, they were just kind of cancelled, postponed. So there's a lot of
yeah,
that activity not taking place. So on the one hand, you've got charities really, really keen to explore alternative methods of fundraising, but at the same time, a lot of the doors are closed to what they've been doing historically. And as you quite rightly say, bandwidth in those organisations is always difficult, like human bandwidth,
for
but
sure.
probably increasingly so in during lockdown. But we reopen we did on the sometime in September from memory of that year in lockdown. And of course that coincided with fairly closely with your news, which happened in October, which kind of again changed everything. Do you want to talk briefly about that?
Yeah, so I hadn't been feeling well throughout 2020 in general. I hadn't been doing very well health wise, but I just kept going to doctors. They didn't really know what was going on. Well, it was hard to see doctors in general. When I say going to doctors, it was predominantly speaking to GPs on the phone whenever I could get an appointment. Um, and I think sadly, because of the pandemic and stuff, I maybe didn't um, get to receive the treatment or the tests and stuff that I would have done at another point in time, which resulted in a lot of the GPs and stuff saying, "Oh, you're probably very anxious because of lockdown," and chalked quite a lot of my symptoms up to anxiety, and everyone's going through a really hard time. But yeah, when it got to October, that's finally when one GP did decide that it was time to send me off for an ultrasound of my thyroid just in case because of all the symptoms I'm having. And I think I remember being at the hospital when they were doing the ultrasound. I didn't really think anything that it was to do with my thyroid, to be honest. I just didn't. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I wasn't well. Um, and I think it was just once I saw the face of the nurse that was doing the ultrasound, I knew it wasn't good. And she went in and got a doctor, and a bunch of people came in and did like a biopsy then and there because it was just meant to be an ultrasound. And yeah, I could just tell it wasn't good. And they were basically like, "You'll get the results. There's a bit of a delay because of COVID, but hopefully you should get the results in a week or two." And then it was a whole nother palaver because I was meant to have an in-person appointment to get the results, which made it also obvious that it probably wasn't good news if they
Yeah,
were doing an in-person appointment during COVID. Um, then last minute they cancelled my in-person appointment and postponed it to the week before. This was on a Friday, so I knew I was going to have to wait till the following week anyway. And it was the week of my birthday as well that I had the biopsy. I had it the day before my birthday, so not the best birthday, but
no,
anyway, could have been worse. Yeah, and then so they cancelled my in-person appointment, said it's been rescheduled for the next week. And then I thought, okay, well, I've just got to wait over the weekend, whatever it is, what it is. And then at like half four in the afternoon, they called me and said, "Oh, you've got cancer." So it wasn't the best experience, but I mean, it was hard at the time. I think we struggled, but we got through it. And like I've said before, I'm really grateful it happened, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I know it's a weird thing to say, probably to say you're really grateful that you had cancer, but for me, it's been like a life-changing experience, but in all the right ways. I think it's really changed my outlook on life. I think I'm much happier. I think I'm much more grateful. I think I take my health not for granted, which I think probably is normal for all of us to do that until you don't have that. So yeah, it wasn't an easy time. I think it was made probably harder by the pandemic, but I'm still extremely grateful that I got the care I did and managed to get the treatment. I had the operation within 2 weeks of them finding the cancer. I had a total thyroidectomy, which was also another process in itself because we ended up coming down to London for that. Because sadly, the where we lived in Manchester, the hospital that I had been assigned to have it done, the surgeon had only done a couple of thyroidectomies, and mum, being mum, went off and researched everything and found a surgeon that had done like thousands of thyroidectomies and was probably the best surgeon in the country for that. So we were very lucky to be able to come down to London and have it done here instead.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, completely life changing in every sense. Clearly, for you at the centre of all of that, but for the whole family, and as you say, the relocation to London and everything that's happened since, the northwest has been really significant. But we were keen to make sure that A, we were around you and close by, and B, we were next to what we perceived to be the hospitals that could provide the best treatment for you nearby, which was, I mean, it was an incredibly challenging time, and as you say, healthcare, I think, for everybody that was having any healthcare that wasn't COVID related was still massively impacted during COVID. So for you to have that surgery in such a short period of time
Yeah,
was almost miraculous,
it
really.
was amazing.
Um, yeah,
And and actually, you just reminded me as well. What something else I was really grateful for was part of because my thyroid. I had the thyroid cancer that I had was quite aggressive and had spread to my lymph nodes. Although they didn't know that at the time, they found that out once they did the surgery. While I was having surgery, he said he saw it had gone to my lymph nodes, and I had to have 10 lymph nodes removed from my chest as well. But because I had that type of aggressive thyroid cancer, I also needed radioactive iodine, which basically involves you taking radioactive iodine. And because it's radioactive, you have to basically be in a room on your own in a hospital that's a special room with lead walls and stuff. And that whole facility had been closed down for the whole of 2020. No one was receiving that treatment at all. And I was so lucky that I was able to get that in January as soon as it reopened. So, I mean, although it was a really hard time, at the same time, I feel like I was very lucky with how once we knew what was wrong with me, how it was dealt with,
yeah,
and how quickly it got sorted was very good.
and I think from we talk about the podcast in terms of doing good, doing well, and being well, and obviously, I guess this is our being well sequence. But what was really incredible for me was the support that we got from so many people, just around it. It was amazing, and I don't mean just the health agencies and so on, but literally colleagues, the whole lot. So, we're busy trying to get the fundraising platform back off the ground and working again and sign up new charities. Clearly, you at this point had signed
Yeah, I'd
off.
taken a break.
Um, and we were away, so we were doing that without you, but also figuring out a relocation, getting ourselves down to London, doing some building of websites in the process, and trying to get keep all of their telephony services up and running, and growing that business. So really challenging times, but it's interesting because amidst all of that, I remember sitting in the hospital one day and just looking at some information about supporting the hospital and donating and so on. And I guess me being me was immediately thinking, there's another charity we need to get on the
Yeah,
fundraising platform. And funnily enough, no, though we never approached them, I think they are now one of the charities on the wonderful.org platform, which is
very
great to
cool.
see. Yeah, funny how that happened. So we moving on from that, and great to see the incredible changes that you've made to every aspect of your life and well-being. It is amazing. So whilst a lot of people, as you say, might perceive it as an odd comment, I kind of see where you're coming from as well. It's changed so much in terms of your approach, and I think even that sense of gratitude and things for having every day in front of you and being able to live those days
Yeah.
is really, really, and it's amazing. It really is. Real credit to you for your determination and
I
willpower
think
and all the rest.
it definitely wasn't easy at that time. Like, it's nice to look back now, but that process and those months and that period of time were very, very hard, I think, for everyone.
Yeah,
I think I was very lucky with how supportive everyone was because I didn't necessarily handle it as well as I do now.
yeah,
But I'm very grateful that it happened. And I think also like, it's not just changed my approach, but I think it's also impacted you guys a lot as well. Like, I know lots of, like, you, Gabby, Daniel, Mum, and stuff. A lot of the diet and changes that I've made, I feel like have kind of made you guys think about things in a different way as well,
oh,
which I
completely.
think is nice.
Completely. No, absolutely, because it does. Because you do, I guess, you just take for granted that the food that you're seeing in supermarkets a lot of the time is good and it's okay and it's healthy, and you forget about that profit motivation, and perhaps there are some shortcuts being taken. There are some ingredients being added to things that are maybe not the best for you. So yeah, no, having that sort of holistic view has been really helpful for everybody, in every aspect as well. But I think that the first thing for us was that sort of whatever's happening, absolutely is, and anyone would respond the same way, I'm sure. But it's family first. Whatever needs to be done here, whatever needs to be paused, whatever moves we need to make sure that we can provide the best support that we can, they come first. So it was, trying to do a lot of this amidst all of that as a background, which was definitely challenging.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, like lots of the challenges you say, oh, it's challenging but fun. Clearly, this was one that's not challenging and fun. It's just
Yeah.
challenging, really, really hard. But we slowly started to see some charities coming on board and getting interest. I think we emailed a lot of them, but as you say, that email going back to a load of charities that you've gone, hey, we're closed, sorry about that, is going to always be hard to receive one saying, well, we're back up and running. And by the way, it's going to be probably slightly more onerous in terms of the registration process than it was when we were using a card processor in the background, which was pretty straightforward, really.
And you have to explain to them what open banking is as well, because you have to think, no, like 99% of people don't have a clue what open banking is. Even today, people will have used open banking, but you say the words open banking to them and they have no idea. So trying to convince charities to come back to a platform that now isn't going to use card payments at all as an option and is just going to be open banking, you also have to try and convey in an email to them what open banking is.
Yes, I often say it feels like one of the most unfortunate names for the service or the product that could have been chosen. I understand the rationale of it being around sort of open APIs for fintechs to connect to banks, but of course,
if you're not in that sector, you don't think that.
No, exactly. Put the word open in front of banking for a consumer, and it's kind of what that really doesn't make much sense. The one thing I don't want to be open in terms of access is my bank account. But yeah, that's clearly not the meaning of the term in its context from a fintech's point of view. But yeah, a challenge definitely in terms of that naming of the service. And you've seen a few people adopt different approaches to that with varying degrees of success. But
instant
from
payments
A2A payments, instant bank transfers, pay by bank, all sorts of different things. It's a tricky one because I'm not convinced anyone's completely nailed that term yet to give the consumer the confidence in using the service and
no.
and the provider of the service the enough understanding or enough technical description to make that carry weight as well. It's definitely a challenging name.
And I do think it's interesting how many people don't realise that they use open banking regularly. Yeah. Like I've had friends that I know pay off their credit cards using open banking and they didn't realise that what they're doing is an open banking payment. So.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But that's also good. We're seeing a lot more traction, a lot more, even if people aren't aware, when they first encounter something described as an open banking payment, they're at least going, well, actually, I've seen that kind of thing before. It looks pretty familiar. This is what I'm doing when I'm paying off my card or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So that's good. But we went into this, again, we were saying last episode, a little bit nervous about the fact that we're not only introducing probably even more rigorous diligence processes when we're signing charities up, but we're also asking their donors, fundraisers to put together pages to support charities that's using a technology that they're unfamiliar with and limiting it only to open banking. So no longer will there be card payments on wonderful.org. And I know you weren't around at the time, but I do remember saying to the customer support people, be looking really closely at the responses that we get from donors and whether there's any trepidation. Yeah.
How do I use my card? Which actually, I think, that I was thinking this today has gone drastically down. I don't remember the last time anyone has asked us that. And we used to get that at the start fairly regularly, but it really seems to have gone down a lot. I don't think people expect that as an option anymore.
No, certainly not with us. And whilst we wouldn't advocate, as a commercial organisation at this stage in open banking's growth, only offer open banking and don't give people alternatives. Clearly, I think you want to give people as many alternatives as possible for making a payment. For wonderful.org, that was the route that we chose because, as we say, that kind of removed that ceiling on our impact and reach, and we could support as many donors, charities and fundraisers as we like, which was really, really positive. So reopened, open banking only. Took us a few months, I think, to get the first few charities on board again. A bit like those early days. It wasn't quite 18 months for 100, but it wasn't easy again. But we're now seeing really, really good traction and great adoption from the charities, donors, and fundraisers, and really good sign-ups as we continue to grow, which has been super. I can't remember the exact date, but I do remember having that next penny drop moment of, actually, if this is solving that problem of the expense of moving money from a donor's account to a charity's account, there must be a bigger opportunity here that goes
Yeah,
beyond. Yeah,
for sure. Because I mean, you just have to think everyone pays with cards, and if card processing fees are a problem for us as a fundraising platform, they have to be a problem for every business and everyone that uses card processing as their payment solution. So it
yeah,
made sense that anyone's going to want to reduce those costs, not just us.
exactly. So I think we were starting to think about that. Obviously, you were kind of out of action for the foreseeable, but we were investigating that and indeed having conversations, with the rest of the team about whether this was something that interests them. We'd always had that from that initial sitting down and saying, here's this crazy idea of building a fundraising platform, and can you give up your coffee breaks and lunch hours and weekends to do it? And getting a really positive response to that. I think that had always grown, even down to speaking to people like PR agencies that we'd brought on to support the telecoms business. And we'd said, and as a freebie, if you can give any support to the fundraising platform, that would
Yeah,
be great. We'd seen it even there where the excitement around what we were doing with wonderful.org immediately outstripped anything they were doing on the telephony side, whether it was
yeah,
the employees or the agencies. I mean, one of the agencies won a couple of awards fairly rapidly for the work it did for wonderful.org, even though it was being paid to provide services for the telecoms business. I always found that quite interesting. So it wasn't really too much of a leap to start seeing this commercial opportunity and thinking about, I wonder whether we can exploit that and turn that into a business, whether there's a business model here that we can start to look at. So probably shortly after we were up and running, I mean, all the time as a business, you're getting people inquiring about whether you've thought about an exit plan. Are you interested in
yeah,
selling the business? And obviously, business owners, largely dismiss a lot of that because it comes through pretty much every day. But when those emails started arriving again, telephony, open banking, where does the future feel like it's at? Is it in voice telephony, or am I looking around at people using their smartphones and thinking, well, how many of them are holding them to their ears and how many of
yeah.
them are tapping on a screen? So it always felt to me like, or not always, but it was beginning more and more to feel like this was an opportunity to maybe start responding to some of those emails and seeing whether we could think about what the next steps were going to be.
And I think we have a team as well. We had and we still have a team that gets really excited about sort of working on something that's new and cutting edge. And open banking very much felt like that, quite in contrast to what telephony was, I guess, heading towards. It felt like so, it made sense. I think the team felt really motivated to start a new project that was something totally different, but
Yeah.
really exciting and cutting edge.
Yeah, it was taking that giving back element of the day that people were enthusiastic about it and making it their full-time job.
Yeah,
I remember, marketing departments being exactly the same within the telecoms business. Oh, we're promoting, we're promoting the telephony service, or can I do something on wonderful.org
exactly.
today? And
I mean, the stories you can write from fundraisers, from charities and stuff are obviously going to be much more interesting, probably to research and also to read
yeah,
than about telephone conferencing.
yeah.
Let's be honest.
I often say that if I'm looking for a bit of inspiration on a day, just check out the wonderful.org platform and look at the amazing work that people are doing, whether that's a fundraiser, whether it's the donations that you see coming
Yeah,
through and people's generosity, or just the work of the charities that they're supporting. Clearly, it's all incredibly motivational. So it's always been really nice to sit in the midst of all of that and provide a service. But to turn that problem that we encountered into a solution for the fundraising platform, and then see a commercial opportunity which created this win-win-win-win scenario. We talk
yeah.
about the greater the success of the commercial operation in providing open banking payments, the more charities, donors, and fundraisers that we can support. It was one of those moments when you think, actually, this is a really, really powerful opportunity that we've got here. we've got a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of passion for the project as a part-time thing, as a philanthropic thing that we can now direct into the day job, um, and a huge amount of commensurate opportunity attached with that, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
So I think we were starting to employ, sorry, not employ that. I think we were starting to recognise that pretty quickly after we got up and running with the fundraising platform on open banking again.
I think as well, especially once we started to see those donations and those transactions take place, and we saw, there isn't that much friction. This actually works really well. We're not getting loads of tickets of people saying, "How do I make a payment?" Um, that was very reassuring to see that if this can be applied to the charity sector on a fundraising platform, then, as we've said before, that's probably not necessarily the first audience you think of when you think of let's try out a new technology. So if we're seeing that it's working that well for charities, then this has huge potential to be put on like a checkout of an e-commerce website or somewhere like that.
Completely, and I think that was really key in a lot of the decision making because, as you say, you wouldn't go to charities first of all to launch any kind of innovation because you know how time poor they are and it's difficult. They just don't have that bandwidth to be investigating new technology. So, kind of foisting upon them this service and saying it is only this and you can only donate using it actually gave us some really really good data points to look at. And you're right, the feedback has been really super positive. And for me, one of the great things is just knowing how much further any kind of budget goes by using open banking to support the work of wonderful.org than it
Yeah.
would have gone when we were using cards to process those payments. So it feels like that's a good opportunity to round out Series 1, Episode 4 of the Wonderful Podcast. Next time, we're going to be talking a little bit about our FCA authorization and a process that we thought was going to take a few weeks, ended up being a little bit longer. Quite rightly so, too. So we'll be delving into FCA authorization in more detail next episode and talking about this continued journey. Just before we finish, though, Carmen, if I can just hand over to you for the usual social shares and information.
Yes. So wherever you're listening, whether it is YouTube, if you're watching us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, if you could please subscribe, drop us a comment, a like, share our podcast, any sort of interaction is greatly appreciated and will make a huge difference for us. We also have an email address, hello@wonderfulpodcast.com. If you want to email us how you're doing good, doing well, or being well, we'd love to hear more from you. And we're also actively looking for guests now for season 2. So if you would like to join us and tell us about how you're doing good, doing well, or being well, we would also really enjoy hearing from you.
Absolutely. No, that would be great. The more stories of excellent businesses, startup life, how you're balancing that with well-being, whatever it might be, any of those 3 topics, we would really love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you join us next time.
Take care.